A new day arrives on the high plains of eastern Colorado. A slight breeze will slide down the front range of the Rocky Mountains, and the dance of the swirling blades goes on. The towers, as tall as 30-story buildings, are new. But the winds of America's Great Plains have blown through these grasses for 95 million years. Nearly 2 centuries before the modern wind machines began generating power. The original windmills creaked and groaned, pulling water from the earth, turning a wilderness into the world's breadbasket. As wagon trains brought farmers and ranchers over the Missouri River and into the new frontier.
They are so much a part of the story of American farms.
Windmills are really iconic. They stand for where we've been.
Out here, they complete the magic of a summer sunset. Yet, time has a way of erasing all that we love. And across this great expanse, you will see broken towers, rusted blades, and long-forgotten scraps of these icons of rural America. But in Syracuse, Nebraska, an engineer who helped send Apollo to the moon now spends his days on hubs, pinion gears, and wind vanes.
Most of the windmills that we fixed are made in the early 20s.
Dave Straub, the Rocket Man, is now the Windmill Man. And in Nebraska, Kansas, and Iowa, he races to farms to save the towers before they're gone.
Say, well, I've got a windmill here. If you want it, you better come get it because the bulldozer is ready to push it down.
He'll grind, press, cut, and manhandle these metal pieces back into the machines first built 100 years ago.
70% of the windmills that we sell are just for spinning in the wind. The nostalgia is what sells a lot of them.
Just up the road, you can see exactly how they built the windmills in the old days.
It's a time capsule.
It's exactly as it was.
Walk through the front door of the old Craigle Windmill factory, and you tumble into the 1800s.
It's a walk down memory lane. There is so much original history in here, not replicated, untouched through time.
Actually, it's exactly the way it was the day they shut it down. In theory, they could still build a windmill. Here, you get a hands-on lesson.
At 30 miles per hour, the wheel would kick out of the wind.
In Ohio Amish country, the windmills still operate on farms that are off the electric grid, and fathers teach sons and grandsons how to do it the old way.
Turn of the century, there were 1,500 windmill manufacturing companies.
Today, there's only one left.
We're the last American-made windmill.
Arrow Motors started building these in the 1880s, but when electricity reached the farms to pump water, you could see the writing on the wall.
It was a bad time for air motor.
A bit of Americana was dying in the fields. Deep in the heart of Texas, they're roaring back to life.
We're seeing a resurgence. I'm not going to let it die on my watch.
So I love putting them up in the wind and seeing them pump water.
In California, Tom Anderson is a busy man rebuilding the old windmills.
Yep, keep some tension on it.
His office most days is 75 feet up.
But when you're standing up there, you can feel every little sway. Each one of those blades on the windmill, that's like a spinning razor blade, and it will slice and dice you.
Different day every day, and with Tom, it's never a dull moment.
Put hands on that thing in just a second.
On up some more!
Driving, climbing, grunting. He's on a mission to save the old machines.
The windmiller's tool right there, baby.
And in New Mexico, they're teaching about the windmills in the classroom.
It's got to be hands-on.
Why a major university's curriculum is all about technology from the 1800s.
I love getting my hands dirty. I love learning a new skill.
All across America, they are inventing tools and methods to keep the old machines running. Because on rolling hills and in flat valleys, on top of mountains and at the water's edge, anywhere the winds blow, they are saving Americana. Saving the great icons of the American West.
Flaps are open, generators are on.
Okay, line up!
We copy you down, Eagle.
On lonely Kansas Highway 36, another giant wind turbine blade goes racing by. It feels like the special trucks and trailers are chasing the wind. In Wyoming, in eastern Nevada, western Ohio, turbines are spinning up a storm, making power to run whole cities. We've been down this road before. In the 1840s, covered wagons rolled along the Oregon Trail right across the high plains. And those pioneers were in a hurry, some chasing free land in Oregon, others after the gold in California. Yet many saw a different gold here on the Great Plains. In 1865, the Civil War ended. And by 1869, the Transcontinental Railroad was bringing thousands of Americans west. Many went no further than the Great Plains.
They homesteaded the property around here. A lot of the soldiers that were in the Civil War, instead of mustering out pay, were given 160 acres of land. And so they would come out here and build a sod home, and they needed water if they didn't have a creek or a lake nearby.
So, across the plains, Americans got their land. And along with barns and sod homes, up went the windmills, as far as the eye could see. In no time, the windmill factories went to work. In Nebraska City, we still get to see what one of these factories looked and sounded like.
It's important to preserve places like this because you just don't find them every day.
Built by cousins George and Louis Kregel in 1879, it was handed down to Art Kregel, who was still working here at age 93.
Went home to eat a little bit of a midday meal, and he never made it back because he had a stroke, and 2 weeks later he ended up passing away.
As if you just walked out and everybody went to lunch and nobody came back. Oh, that's just basically what happened.
Imagine the whole place untouched, just the way he left it. Letters and invoices still in the typewriters in the office. It's one of the most perfect industrial time capsules in America. You see a windmill factory just as it was in the old days.
It allowed nothing to come in and nothing to go out.
You start looking at the work tables as you walk around the museum. The hammer is just sitting right there. It's not on the wall on a peg or it's home.
Here you see how they pressed the blades, how they painted logos on the wind vanes, and built the towers.
They can't believe that this is still here.
You can see the unique brake pad system of the Ely windmill. When the wind kicks up, it just shuts down.
At 30 miles per hour, the wheel would kick out of the wind and it would lock at the gear piece here.
Outside, you see how an old Ely windmill pulls up water.
The one turn of the wheel at the top is the same as one water pump down at the bottom. And so you can see the pump rod here, the wooden piece that connects to the water pump, is what actually does the pumping of the water pump via the wheel.
Just like the old days when the Kregels captured the wind. At one time, there were hundreds of these windmill factories.
The 1920s, 1930s, there was a windmill company on every street corner. Like the automobile, you saw this huge demand in windmills.
You can still find the oldest of the windmills saved and preserved. The American Windmill Museum in Lubbock, Texas, is packed with history. Back in the 1950s, Texas Tech professor Billy Wolf began collecting the old windmills before they were gone. Her vision has created the largest windmill museum in the world.
I'm having a blast up here.
In Pella, Iowa, you'll find a replica of one of the old Dutch mills used to grind grain. The Vermeer windmill is a copy of an 1850s mill, part of the Pella Historical Village. The town was founded by Dutch immigrants. You see it in the architecture. Back in the day, there were several of these styles of mills across the Midwest. Dave Balk used to run a famous Dutch bakery in town. Now he's a volunteer windmiller.
That's for the sails to be attached to. When we attach the sails, then we climb up this lattice work, go up about 3/4 of the way and start hooking them on these hooks. And actually these right here, on a very windy day, we can take these out, cut down on how much wind you actually want.
They all live for those windy days when they can grind the grain.
We wait for the perfect wind, and when that occurs, everybody gets an email or a text that says, "Be here and don't be late."
The spinning gears, powered by the wind, make sacks of flour and takes us back to the 1850s. And Visitors to Windmill Lane in Hiawatha, Kansas can walk among another unique collection. 43 windmills were donated by local farmer Fred Kale and others at the Brown County Ag Museum. One is made of wood, another bicycle parts. Some work, others, well, they're in bad shape. But as the storms sweep across eastern Kansas, this place comes alive. The squeaking, the spinning blades, the towers, big and small. Just look up and your imagination will run wild. You really feel you're walking the Great Plains in the 1800s. And the variety. Dempster, made in Nebraska. Baker, out of Wisconsin. Aeromotor, Chicago. Windcharger, from Iowa. The Ely, Eclipse, Bradley, Fairbury, the Curry.
And then they made their tails corrugated like this. They were selling them for $17.25. This is the real prize. It's a 1897 12-foot diameter bell hub air motor windmill.
It was Aeromotor that outlasted them all.
The air motor helped settle the West. We had the best technology of the time, so windmill sales just exploded.
Nick Oman is the new general manager of the company and says in the early days the numbers were epic. It was the Amazon or Ford Motor Company of its day.
The first 3 years, they sold 30 windmills. The fourth year, they sold 20,000 windmills.
Yet by the 1950s, it nearly went under until a group of ranchers moved the company to San Angelo, Texas.
It was a bad time for air motor, and these guys saw it, realized that somebody needed to bring it back to life, brought it back here to San Angelo, started making our own parts again, really focusing on quality control.
Now it's a booming factory. In here, they make virtually all the parts of the windmills, grinding, drilling, punching out parts, welding other sections. It's non-stop in here.
Just rolling some crimps in it.
Here they take the sheet metal and cut, bend, crimp, spot weld, and even solder.
Getting it nice and hot so that the solder sticks to it. Much rather work with sheet metal than in plumbing. Got to make sure everything's sealed so that it's watertight.
Shane is putting together a hood that will go over the gearbox.
Clean it up, make it look smooth.
In another area, he's putting the torch to support pieces. Before your eyes, the heat straightens the sections. While the design is simple, there are lots of moving parts and names for every piece.
You've got your bath, then you have your large gears, a 751 hold down bar. Then from there you got your pitman arms to your yoke assembly, guide loop, oil ring. Then you have your pinion gears on the hub shaft.
These things will last for a long time, but like any car, an oil change is key.
So you drain it out and clean it up once a year. We have a little side plug right here. If you go in there and clean up everything, there's no reason why it shouldn't last for 75 years.
The mills come in all sizes.
This is our smallest. That's a 6-foot vane. This is a 14-foot vane. This is the second largest that we make. That's a 16.
This is a 6-foot pinion gear that goes on the hub for motor, and over here is a 16-foot motor pinion gear.
The factory is loaded with special tools, cranes overhead, robotic welders, brand new CNC machines where computers can do micro-cuts on almost anything. But you also find stuff that's been around nearly a century, some built before World War II.
This machine confirms to orders of the War Production Board.
Anytime it goes down, we have to make the parts for it because we can't order the parts to repair it. On some of it, we can't even get manual. A lot of MacGyvering going on.
So why is a 130-year-old company suddenly so busy?
We're seeing a resurgence.
We restore some of the old windmills, and we also purchase new ones from the Air Motor Windmill Company in Texas.
In Ohio, Amish country, Melvin Troyer, his father, and son are keeping these old machines running and putting up new mills.
Grandpa started it in the 1920s. When my dad's 82, when he was turned 75, he quit climbing windmills.
Here in Holmes County, it's a simpler life, a portal to the early days of America. Ponies pull children to school. The silos frame the farms. And all over, you find old windmills.
The most common windmills we install are an 8-foot wheel or a 10-foot wheel on 40-foot towers. Amongst the English people, we install windmills for them too as well.
4 generations of Troyers have been saving this bit of history.
A lot of that's for nostalgic reasons.
It seems the past has a way of returning when you least expect it.
We sold a lot of windmills to people just trying to get off the grid.
Practical and nostalgic.
For a lot of the people that grew up with windmills around them, they get to where they miss that sound. They get used to hearing that, and they like to remember back when they were young. The creaking of it, the sound of it turning in the wind, something that is relaxing for people.
And you have these guys that absolutely hated them as kids, but now that they're adults, they bring back such fond memories. Their parents, their grandparents, at the land they grew up on. Now they want one of their own just for the nostalgia of it. Probably 20% of our sales are what we call spinners. People put them out there on their property and they just want to watch them spin and hear them squeak. There's a lot of windmill junkies out there.
This is old school here.
Tom Anderson is one of the biggest junkies of them all. The owner of California Windmills has installed or restored hundreds of windmills across the West.
Probably going to be some bees in there.
Today, he's working on a mill in Arbuckle, California that's nearly a century old.
I can ballpark it. This is probably a 25, 26, 27, somewhere right in there.
It's always been there. All the time we were kids, it was always pumping water.
John Manhart grew up here under that old windmill.
We were raised with a windmill, so they squeak. In the evenings when the west wind blows, you'll hear it squeaking all the time. It's kind of like a dog barking, you get used to it.
But the aero motor with a 10-foot diameter wheel needs maintenance if it's going to survive another century.
The windmiller's tool right there, baby. You got to have your spud. It allows us to line up holes to pry and move. And the other windmiller's tool, the vice grips. Don't leave home without them.
So Tom packs his tools and oil and begins the climb. He's locked the wheel so it doesn't spin or turn, but still has to crawl over the rickety wood platform. And the grease gun does its thing.
Anything that articulates, moves, you got to get some oil and grease, and a lot of it.
The view up here, always interesting.
The bonuses are the views up on top of the towers. You get to see landscape in a different perspective.
Anytime we wanted to see what was going on in the country, we'd climb up the windmill, where you could see all over.
It's on to the next one, 70 miles down the road.
My wife made sure the windmill had to be where you could see it in the kitchen.
For decades, Jim and his late wife, Virginia, woke to the view of spinning blades.
It's going to be a little bit stubborn.
So keeping it running is high on his list.
There's a nostalgic attachment to them as the ranches have passed to the heirs, and they just want to keep the machine running and enjoy it for the beauty that it gives them.
So it's pumping again and catching the wind, just like she loved it. Somewhere out here is the windmill Tom thinks about all the time. Long ago, he forgot the location, but not the story.
This man is in love. He's young.
In the old days, it was common to write messages on the sails.
This one here was signed 12/1926. He starts writing about this gal that he's in love with.
It was 1941. World War II loomed on the horizon. No social media, no phones, just a young guy up there with an old lead pencil, writing his heart out.
And on each sail, there are 18 sails on the windmill, he would write a letter to her, professing his love for her. And this is up in Northern California in the Sacramento Valley. And I read the story, sail by sail. Time goes by and he invites her to the dance. And he's thinking, this is the girl for me. At that point, we entered World War II and he was drafted. He writes on the windmill how he hopes that he's going to be able to return.
Not the summer heat, the winter rain, nor the endless solar rays could erase those old words.
He doesn't know where he's going, what's going to happen, but he hopes he can return to her. He says, if I do return, I'm definitely going to marry this woman. 2 years are missing the timeline.
He survived the war, came home, and climbed back up and kept writing.
And he says that he's asked her to marry him. And that was the end of the story.
Well, not really, because Tom continues to hunt for answers to a mystery couple. A story born long ago atop an old windmill. A new day brings a real challenge in Rancho Marietta, outside Sacramento.
It's going to be a little tougher.
Jim's assistant, Juan Cruz, who he trained from scratch, is helping on this one, placing a 14-foot aero motor atop a giant tower. The problem? The wind.
There's a lot more wind, 75 feet in the air, than we've got here on the ground.
They first have to assemble the motor, hub, wheel, and wind vane.
That looks nice.
Remember, everything on a 14-footer is big, so there's plenty of grunting.
Oh, yeah. Nice, like that.
They assemble it on the crane at ground level.
You got to clean the galvanizing out of these.
They even pour the oil in while it's down here. By midday, it's all set to go.
beautiful.
They have just enough time for a quick photo.
I'll take center stage because I'm the old guy.
Unfortunately, the wind is really kicking up, but as Tom climbs, Juan raises the windmill above the top of the tower.
Attaboy, Juan, nice. Oh, it's going to be tough. It's a big machine, and we've got to nurse it down right onto that stub, that mast pipe, and it's a precision fit, so it's going to be good. I'm going to reach out and put hands on that thing in just a second. Let's get past the boom!
They yell back and forth, trying to nurse it down onto the mast pipe.
Yep, keep some tension on it. Up! Boom down a little bit. On up some more.
But it's swinging back and forth in the strong winds.
Unfortunately, today we've got so much wind, we're having a difficult time getting it onto the tower.
Finally, he makes the call.
Gonna have to abort. Come on down.
Juan lowers it to the ground. Tom climbs down.
Wind is howling up there.
So they come back days later, and it goes right up. For this family, the view out front, the spinning windmill, is pure Americana.
Feeling of value in that maintaining these machines for the future.
So where do people like Tom learn about these old machines?
Well, some are heading back to college.
It's that great big trunk of cast iron.
Since 1975, students have come to New Mexico State University to study about these vintage mills.
Windmill Technology Certification Workshop.
In the classroom and the shop, they pore over theory, history, and the mechanics of these machines. It's very hands-on.
I love getting my hands dirty. I love learning a new skill.
The hobbyist has been a big percentage of the people attending.
Here, you see the hope of the future. Younger people learning from the old-timers.
Talk about a trade that is really dying. There's not a lot of young people involved in this field anymore, which kind of breaks my heart.
But that's slowly changing, and this is a big part of saving the old history.
They came from all over the nation to teach people a skill that not a lot of people have nowadays.
And as the classroom goes into the field, they learn with hard hats and safety belts, working up on top of the tower.
How do you think he's going to feel when he falls and hits the ground?
Kevin Moore of Rockridge Windmills is running students up and down, obsessed with safety.
An old pilot saying, there's those of us who have and those of us who will land with our gear up. There's those of us who have fallen off a windmill tower, those of us who will fall off a windmill tower.
Learning things hands-on and learning the hard way.
Where's all the pressure? Spine breaker. A hand for my beautiful assistant.
And it's here in the field, the shop, and the classroom you will meet a windmiller's legend.
Grew up with them on the farm.
Dr. James Dean grew up in the Texas Panhandle in the days after the Dust Bowl.
Some rough times, but some wonderful times.
In those days, windmills were truly a matter of survival.
We were on a dryland farm. It didn't rain. We didn't have any crops. I think I was about 12 years old when we finally got running water, and that was because of a windmill.
So when the long-retired professor comes back once a year to teach at the workshop, it's special for students and personal for him.
I guess what fascinates me the most
is the simplicity of the design. There's nothing complicated about this system, hardly at all. Not a scientist that spent years trying to develop this. They just happened to be out there, needed to try something different. They did, and it worked.
By week's end, the old-timers and young ones gathered to raise a new mill donated by Aeromotor. A sort of final exam. With the grease, the wrenches, the nuts and bolts spinning, they pieced the new windmill together. A true team effort. After signatures and photos, the crane moved in. The mill was attached, slowly raised, and carefully mounted atop the tower. By day's end, the wheel was spinning, already making people remember those earlier, simpler times.
They love that click, 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 click. They love that sound. So many times they evolve back to those childhood memories that they loved.
All across America, from a college classroom to a dusty Kansas road, in a noisy Nebraska workshop, and high atop towers, old factories long silenced and new ones buzzing night and day. On Amish farms and desolate ranch land, these are the people saving our past.
This is where my people are. This is where my passion is.
To walk down memory lane.
It's fascinated me for 35 years.
People tell me, well, my granddad used to have one, so I'd like to have one.
Want to watch them spin and hear them squeak.
Out here, they are all saving Americana. And somewhere, an 80-year-old love letter is blowing in the wind.
Wonderful memories, but it is emotional.
Catching the wind and saving the icons of the American West.